research, mostly European country, Australian, Ukraine, and these research groups were working. But the resource material is available mostly in the Asian region, the fly ash, the slag, the other secondary and byproducts, but no, not much research was going on. So a lot of gray areas was available in the geopolymer research. So that was the background, and then it gives us motivation to initiate geopolymer research. So my background was ceramic engineering. I was interested in waste utilization, and I was also exposed to the cement technology. I have done the cement technology course and worked in a cement plant for some time. So I thought, okay, this is matching with my background. That time, India, China, and many of the countries that were looking for new technology for fly ash utilization and other waste utilization. And there were only few avenues. So geopolymer was a perfect case to pursue. And that time, people were getting aware about the carbon emission or green process. They were protesting to dumping of slag and fly ash and other waste material. Uh, Very interesting part was when you are a young researcher, whether you can write good paper or not is a one of the criteria, and getting research funding. So that time, since it was a new area, research funding was available, and there was a lot of scope to publish good papers. And of course, the topic was having the industrial relevance. So these all things motivated to pursue the research in geopolymer in the year 2000. So we thought that in what area we will do geopolymer research. Some area there are already research group in the world which are working. So if we enter into those research, we will be left behind because already they have earned experience and knowledge. So we have done some analysis, and we have said that research on pure materials like metakaolin, lot of work going on, chemistry, processing, elevated temperature, curing. So we thought we will not focus on these things. As our institute is focused in the material science research, so we thought we will take something which is very relevant as a material and which interests us, and we can make a difference. So we thought that reactivity of the material is the area where we should focus. So we tried to focus on the reactivity, and the immediate concern was fly ash. In India, we get mostly class F fly ash. It has 40 to 50% glass content. But even in this 40 to 50%, if you put it in the alkali solution, 5 to 10% undergoes dissolution. This is because of the poor reactivity. So that is why we have thought reactivity is going to be a very important area. So the question was how to alter the reactivity of this material so that the dissolution and polymerization and everything should be more and faster. And then we thought that we will try to establish a relation between reaction, structure, and property in the geopolymers. So I will just try to explain what is reactivity, because as I understand there are many young students and researchers out there. So just before that, these are the four areas which we thought is our research domain. We will start with reactivity, how it influences the structure of a geopolymer. A structure means microstructure, mesostructure, nanostructure, everything. How the structure leads to the property, and if we have everything, what are the application of these geopolymers? So with these four research domain, we just try to explain the reactivity thermodynamically. So if you see the law of thermodynamics, unstable phases are more reactive. So glass is less stable than the crystalline. So glass or amorphous phase, these are more reactive than the crystalline. So if I take a material which is crystalline, say for example quartz, and if I take the same composition material which is amorphous like glass, quartz glass, the reactivity of the amorphous will be high. And this is because of the high volume enthalpy in the glass or amorphous phases and low volume enthalpy in the crystalline phases. With this understanding, we just thought that what are the process which can alter the reactivity of a material, because we were going to try a lot of low reactive material. So we thought that how we will make them the high reactive material. So we have found that there are 4 processes which can be used to increase the reactivity or convert the crystalline material or a melt into the amorphous state. So the first thing is vapor condensation. As you are from construction material side, you might be knowing the fume silica, which is condensed from the vapor phase, and that is why it is amorphous with very high surface area and with very high reactivity. So that is one process by which you can alter the reactivity. The second process is mechanical activation. I will explain it little bit more in later section. The third thing is the precipitation from solution. Typically, the sol gel process is follow the same rule, precipitation from the solution. And fourth is rapid cooling from the melt. For example, like the granulated blast furnace slag, it is cooled rapidly. It is quenched in water, so that because of very high speed of cooling, it becomes amorphous. So we thought we will focus on 2 things. One is mechanical activation and second is rapid cooling from the melt. So in the following section, I am just explaining little bit of it. So what is the mechanical activation? This is a very interesting area of research. And here what happens, ball milling or milling, everybody knows. When you are milling the particles, what is happening? Its specific surface area increases. You go on mill, it will increase up to some time. After that, it will stop. So there will be no further improvement. But we have very specific type of milling devices which can alter the nature of the particles, improve the reactivity of the particles. Some of these devices are like attrition mill or jet mill or eccentric vibratory mill or planetary mill. So there are different types. So in normal like ball milling or vertical roller milling, the energy transfer from the mill to a particle is 5% only, and 95% energy gets lost. Whereas in mechanical activation, the energy transfer from the machine to the particle is around 15%. 15% is a very high energy which gets stored in the particles. So as a result, many changes takes place. So this is a graph, typical graph where grinding and mechanical activation has been explained. The first stage of the grinding time is the Rittinger stage, where particle size reduction takes place. It is the rapid particle size reduction. In the second phase of the grinding, it is aggregation stage, where particle size also reduces, but to a lesser extent. But you will see at the after some time, this reduction of particle size is lowering down. And in the third stage, where agglomeration stage, the reduction of particle size stops. In some cases, due to agglomeration, the particle size increases because there is melt of 2 particles and that they get welded together and a lot of activity. And this agglomeration is the area which falls under the effect of mechanical activation. So the changes which typically occur as a result of mechanical activation is increase in surface area, then stresses and defects in the solid structure, amorphization. Like if you go on mill a crystalline material, after some time it may convert to amorphous phase, or part of it may convert to amorphous phase. We have this type of a study for many minerals like quartz and other things, and we could see the evidences. Then the fourth change is fracture leading to dynamic creation of fresh surfaces for reaction. So you have more surface available for the reaction as a result of mechanical activation. And finally, the energy storage in the form of defect. Defect means crystal defect I am talking. So the energy gets stored in the form of defect. And when geopolymerization takes, this energy also gets released. So you have more energy available for the reaction, which improves the geopolymerization reaction. So this is a very famous conceptual flow sheet given by Peter Duxton and al. So in this flow sheet only, just I try to demonstrate that due to mechanical activation, how this conceptual flow diagram is improving. So the first stage is dissolution stage, you can see. So when you mechanically activate the raw material before putting it for geopolymerization, the rate of dissolution increases. So you have the faster dissolution, you have the more dissolution. Then we could not scientifically study the speciation and equilibrium due to mechanical activation. So I'm not commenting on this part. But in the gelation part, yes, there are a lot of changes. The character of geopolymer gel changes due to mechanical activation. You may find a geopolymer with different AL and SI ratio. You may find a gel with less density. You may find gel with a very different morphology depending on the starting material. So here mechanical activation affects the geopolymerization reaction. And finally, in the polymerization and hardening, it leads to very faster polymerization and hardening. So overall, you can see this whole flow sheet gets affected if we mechanically activate a raw material before subjecting to geopolymerization reaction. One interesting result I am showing that we have used fly ash. We have milled in mechanical activation devices. There are two types of devices. One is vibratory mill fly ash, one is attrition mill fly ash. The third one was classified fly ash and fourth one was raw fly ash. Out of these four, what we kept was the D50 of particle size, the average particle size we have kept 5 micron for all the cases. So there was no difference in the particle size. But as a result of mechanical activation, we could achieve very high strength, up to 120 megapascal strength in case of eccentric vibratory milling. Whereas for other type of mechanical activation like attrition milling, we could not found that high strength. So what we have concluded from this study was that mechanical activation of a particular material is mill specific. Like for example, fly ash could be best activated in eccentric vibratory mill, whereas when we used some type of slag, vibratory mill was not giving good result. In case of the blast furnace slag, attrition mill has given very good result. We have also studied volcanic ash, and in that case, planetary mill has given better result than other mills. So that you need to optimize. There are a lot of things which I will not be able to present due to shortage of time, and I'm not entering into deep science, but this was an interesting result which I wanted to share. The second thing of altering reactivity, the fourth point what we have seen is quenching of melt give you amorphous phase. So all these high reactive material, they are the result of faster cooling. Whether it is metakaolin, it is fully amorphous or granulated blast furnace like or these are. So you have high reactive material, you have low reactive material. So you can make a blended geopolymer by blending low reactive material with high reactive material. For example, you can blend fly ash with metakaolin or fly ash with granulated blast furnace slag. Similarly, one of these material with one of these material. But it is not so easy. You have to optimize many parameters like how much low reactive material you will add and how much high reactive material. That is the first piece. The second thing will be that what will be the alkali concentration you are going to use, because when you blend two type of material, your alkali solution needs to be customized. So all these things should be taken into the account. And for the blended geopolymer, where you mix two type of materials, typically you use a process like low reactive, high reactive. You are mixing, you are blending, you are mixing with alkali solution, you have geopolymerization, and then you have the product. Now, there is a big issue with this process. I know many of the people, or majority of the people, they follow this process, but we could find the limitation of this process. What is happening when you are mixing low reactive and high reactive, and then you are mixing alkali solution? Your high reactive material, because of its reactivity, consumes the alkali solution, whereas the low reactive material remain as aggregate, because the reaction of low reactive material will start maybe after 8 hours, 10 hours, or 24 hours. By that time here, the reaction is almost complete and it has consumed most of the alkali solution. So the binding property you are getting with the high reactive material, whereas the low reactive material remains unreactive aggregate. So we could find this, and we have slightly modified the process flow sheet. So what we have suggested is you put low reactive material for alkali aging first, and once you know that its outer boundary, the grain boundary, it has started dissolving, then you put the high reactive material. So reaction is already taking place here with some of the alkali, and remaining alkali will react with the high reactive. So in this way, you can just synchronize the reaction of two material. So both the material will participate in the geopolymerization. And just we analyze some of the result we have seen by using this, although there is minor improvement in the compressive strength, but durability has improved significantly. So that was very interesting, and I suggest all my colleagues and students that when you are blending geopolymer, just follow this second modified process. You may get a better geopolymer. So we have developed some blended geopolymer using this concept. The first was the geopolymer cement. It was in the two part, one liquid and one solid part. It was equivalent to Portland Pozzolana cement, fly ash cement, with improved durability and better abrasion resistance. The second product what we developed using the blending of two or more material was self-glazed tiles. So what we did is two things we have done. In the tile, when we casted the tile, we have made it functionally gradient casting, means the coarser fraction is going into the bottom, whereas the finer and more reactive fraction, it remains on the top side and geopolymerizes very fast and forms a glassy phase, which is called gismodine. It is a feldspar phase, and that was giving the glazing effect. So this was very interesting finding, and we could produce tiles with different colors and design at 100-degree temperature without higher temperature firing. The third thing what we developed using blending of different material was paving blocks from fly ash granulated blast furnace slag, or fly ash red mud, or from different composition which were meeting the Indian standard specification, and we could find no leaching, and it was ready to use in 7 days. But all this development, they were in the laboratory scale. Then we started studying the reaction kinetics. As we planned earlier that after altering reactivity, we must know the reaction kinetics. So what information we get from reaction kinetics? First is, it studies the rate of chemical process and reaction mechanism, and you can find the activation energy, rate constant, and you can measure reaction kinetics either by measuring concentration or by measuring heat of hydration. and different tools which are used, DTATG or DSC, chemical method, FTIR, ICC. We have used this one, isothermal conduction calorimetry. And what we did is we have done the model-free analysis and model-based analysis both. One of my PhD student, Dr. Sushant Nath, he has done his PhD on reaction kinetics of fly ash geopolymer. And we have found a lot of challenges when we study reaction kinetics of a heterogeneous material. Basically, the composition is heterogeneous, so reaction is not uniform. There are many reaction paths. Parallel to the main reaction, there are minor reaction paths. And this is basically due to different type of impurities. Like if I take the example of fly ash, presence of iron gives you another reaction path. If you have titanium, it may lead to another reaction mechanism and so on. Then the reaction is within the narrow and low temperature range. Then for a low reactive material, it takes very prolonged time below, especially when the temperature is less than 35 degrees centigrade. Like it has been reported by us and by many others that in some of the fly ash, reaction is not completed even after 28 days. So that is a very, that makes the study of reaction kinetics very difficult. Then the product of geopolymer gel is always mixed with the unreacted. So characterization is also very difficult for reaction kinetics. And if you have free alkali, means all the alkali has not been consumed in the reaction, then you will get the wrong result. So you have to be very careful for the reaction kinetic study. And I will give you two typical examples of our results, which was interesting. One was for fly ash, which was done, where reaction kinetics has studied. So you can see at different temperature, like if the temperature is around 60 degree, you have a different reaction path, you have the different reaction mechanism, but when temperature is low, you have the different. And what we could find is below 35 degree, below 34 degree, it is impossible to measure the reaction kinetics of fly ash because the rate of reaction is very, very slow and the heat evolve in the calorimeter very, very slow. So after that, we have done the study related to model-free approach, and we have mapped the variety of fly ash in relation with the mechanical activation. And this paper we have published in Journal of Thermal Analysis and Calorimetry. Very interesting paper. We have studied around 49 numbers of samples at different milling time, at different temperature and different heat evolution. And you can see like here at one places at 60 degree, you have the different reaction mechanism of raw fly ash, but when you mill it, you can see the graph has changed, shifted to the left side. So all these we have studied. And then we have determined the efficacy parameters of the reaction kinetics. There are a lot of results which has been given in the paper, Journal of Thermal Analysis and Calorimetry. So you can refer if you are interested in this area. So even in the efficacy analysis, what we have seen that milled for more time has a different efficacy parameter, but it is not that if you go on milling, it will be giving you the better reaction kinetics. What we have observed that the samples milled for 60 minutes and 90 minutes, they have given better reactivity than the samples milled for 120 minutes. So that is another thing. So you have to study. So after the reaction kinetics, we studied the microstructure because after the reaction, the implication of reaction is on the development of the microstructure, and the implication of microstructure is on the property of the geopolymer. So what we found that we need the combination of tool, FTIR or NMR, supported by XRD, SEM, TEM, etc. Many more, sometimes Raman studies is needed and other thing, then only you will be able to give a reliable interpretation of the microstructure. So we found that in the heterogeneous composition, in the geopolymer, which is mostly heterogeneous, if you take microstructure from one point, it is not the representative. It will vary drastically in the sample. Maybe other point you will find altogether a different microstructure. So that was very challenging situation, how to explain the microstructure. Then what happens, another very challenging problem is you are starting some material which is amorphous in nature. You are reacting it, you are making geopolymer which is also amorphous. Now, how you will characterize that which part of the amorphous material is before geopolymerization and which part is the resulting geopolymer, because you will get a hump, not crystalline peak, and more or less at the same place. So that was another big challenge, characterization of amorphous material, which we undertook. Then there are different type of geopolymer gel which vary in density, nature, and composition, and each gel leads to different property. So you need to do lot of index analysis to ascertain the nature of gel phase. So with all these things, we did lot of characterization. I'm giving you one interesting result of each thing. This is the FTIR result. Basically, when we make geopolymer, we are more concerned about the peak around 1100 to 1050 wave number, because this gives you the SiO-Si bonding characteristic. So when we altered the reactivity of fly ash, you can see Fa0 to Fa4. Fa0 is raw fly ash without altering reactivity, and then different milled fly ash in mechanical activity devices. So there was the peak shift mainly towards the left side, which tells the structural reorganization, which we plotted here also wave number, which changed from say 1082 to 1096 or so. So this gives that yes, definitely something is taking place, some structural reorganization is taking place, and if you alter the reactivity, the rate of structural reorganization may be much more. So this was one interesting finding. Another interesting finding was related to XRD, where we have done the XRD of fly ash geopolymer of different reactivity and try to characterize the amorphous phase. From the first graph, everything looks same. How you will explain? So with the help of software and with the help of some expert, in fact, I would like to acknowledge here one Ferenc Cristalli of Hungary. He helped me a lot to understand the amorphous phase. And when we have plotted with the help of software the amorphous phase at around 30 degree to theta, we could see the shift in the amorphous hump. These are the amorphous hump. So there is a shift towards left side, and this shift is because in the gel more aluminum phases is coming, more aluminum is coming into the structure, so it is shifting towards the left side. This was a very interesting finding, and the peak shift started from say around 27.1 degree to 27.9 degrees. So this is very minor, but you have to see very minutely, then only you will be able to understand the amorphous phase characteristic. The third thing is the SEM, which everybody do, but SEM is again a very tricky thing. In the same sample, you can find a lot of morphological changes. So there are some typical example of the geopolymer which has been subjected to geopolymerization for 28 days. So you will see the crystalline aluminosilicate phase in the first graph is unreacted. Practically there is no soda in the composition. So it remain as aluminosilicate rich crystalline phases. But at the amorphous senosphere phases, you can see formation of lot of sodium aluminosilicate hydrate gel. The nature of this gel also changes with time, with concentration. The most challenging part is in one place you will find, say, gel with X percentage of soda. Just next to that, you will find a same ASH gel with Y percentage of soda. So it depends on the reactivity of the material, how much soda they take for reaction. So this is another very challenging area which I wanted to share with you all. And when you have the iron rich phases, then you can see a different morphology, but finally it gets into ferrosialate phase. If you follow Professor David Dovitz, he mentioned that in the iron rich there is possibility of forming iron, silicon, aluminum phases, which is ferrosialate. So we could find that ferrosialate phase. But interestingly, we could also find calcium silicate hydrate without any soda content in the thing. So just showing all these things is in a heterogeneous material, it is very difficult to come to a conclusion based on only a scanning electron microscopy or any one tool, because it gives you sometimes very misleading result. We also try to study some nanoscale through transmission electron microscopy, which was again very revealing for us. And what we have found that when there is the formation of proper geopolymer gel, there is always nanoparticle inside the gel. And this nanoparticle characteristic is very close to zeolite. Zeolite is a mineral phase equivalent to geopolymer. So you will find the nano-sized zeolite, sometimes chabazite, sometimes sodalite, or this type of zeolite thing. And when there is gel phase, there is always a diffuse boundary. But when you will see the aluminosilicate which has not reacted, there is always the sharp boundary. So the boundary is not altered, whereas in the gel phase, the boundary is very diffuse and it can bond with the aggregates. And you can just a CD image which shows the presence of nanocrystal. So we try to establish the processing, geopolymerization and nanostructure, which we published in one of the paper, where you can see with milling time, the particles are getting crushed, broken, but mostly the glassy particles are getting broken, whereas the crystalline particles, they remain coarser. And when you subject to geopolymerization of these material, you can see that formation of dense gel when you use the raw fly ash, but this gel become porous, and these pores are nanopores when you mechanically activate the fly ash before geopolymerization. And with the milling time, the size of the pore increases, and also the nano particles present in it is also increases. It means because of the more energy, part of the aluminosilicate gel, which was supposed to remain as geopolymer, converted into zeolite phases. So this paper has also been published in one of the journal. Then what should be the property of geopolymer? Just I put an interesting photograph. What is a bad geopolymer and what is a good geopolymer? So you have to correlate good geopolymer and bad geopolymer with the time. You know, I visit many of the university where people come that I have made a geopolymer with 40 megapascal strength, or 50 megapascal strength, or 100 megapascal strength. I ask them to dip in water and measure the strength after 1 week, whether it is remain the same or not. So this is like a very high compressive strength with time, which is burning out, and with time it is totally gone. This is a bad geopolymer, means no durability at all. With time it is deteriorating, whereas a good geopolymer is always healthy. With time there is no deterioration. So that is why I put this picture for easy understanding. So the good geopolymer, if I take at nanoscale, there should be coexistence of nanoparticle in the gel, and there should be diffusion of gel at grain boundary. Whereas at micro scale, there is the presence of soda aluminosilicate gel uniformly distributed. The microstructure should be compacted and the pores which are available should be uniformly distributed. It should not be like that at one places we have very large pores, at other places it is very dense. Then it will give you the gradient property. And at mesoscale, of course, compressive strength is one, but durability is very important. So how the durability of geopolymer is, and then there should be no leachability and no efflorescence. Then if your geopolymer is fitting in these three scales on these criteria, you have a very good geopolymer. Then how to make a good geopolymer? So I just wanted to share some of the small tips which I have used or I have learned in course of time, how to make the small geopolymer, good geopolymer. So the very first thing is characterizing your raw material properly. I see, like, if you have a very strong chemistry background, you take bulk chemical composition as the criteria, and accordingly you decide on the alkali concentration. But what we have found is sometimes it is misleading. You have to also see the mineralogy. Out of 100%, how much material is crystalline, how much material is in the glassy form. Because the reaction is glassy is much faster, the reaction in crystalline is negligible. So that also you need to take into the account. Now, if you are blending 2 or 3 material together, again, you need to study the reactivity of each material. And then you have to decide the time of mixing. Then, many places when those who are entering into the geopolymer field, they use very high concentration of alkali and they find very good result. But more alkali doesn't necessarily mean that you are getting the best geopolymer. It may give you good strength in the beginning. So how much alkali needs to be added, it should be optimized. Then mixing is again very important thing. You mix a geopolymer properly, you have a very homogeneous, very good strength geopolymer. You take a geopolymer paste, give it to 3 person, and the 4 sample you give in a mechanical mixer, ask them to mix, make geopolymer, you will see all 4 has given you 4 different property. So that is why, because the mixing is not same in the 4 cases. And that is why we recommend always use of mechanical mixer with optimized parameters. Also, what happens during the mixing, especially a country like India, we have 3 seasons. In rainy season, you will find a more flowing mix because the relative humidity is very high. In summer, it is different. So you have to optimize everything during the mixing time. Granulometry is another very, very important part. If you have all fine grains in your geopolymer, you may land up with a lot of micro cracks which are not visible by eyes, but you can see it through microscope. And if you have more coarse grain, you have a lot of porosity. So that a proper granulometry is to be managed, so that there should be combination of coarse grains, medium grains, and fine grains. Then if your paste is too sticky, again, you have a lot of problem, especially when you go to the higher scale geopolymer, when you are making more geopolymer, pouring will be very, very difficult. And also there will be a lot of trapped air. So you may have to use the plasticizer or super plasticizer, but most of the plasticizer, it reduces or retard the strength development in the geopolymer. So that again you need to optimize. Then water evaporation is another very important thing. Those who are making geopolymer, they are covering it with plastic or something so that the water should remain in the geopolymer. But when you think of upscaling or you are producing tons and tons of geopolymer, sometimes it is not possible to close the geopolymer mold and other things, and that time water evaporates, which gives you reduced property. So again, you have to find out that you are keeping geopolymer in a saturated atmosphere. And then the choice of temperature is another very important. It should be based on the scientific data, because what I have seen, the geopolymerization reaction, what you get best at 60 degrees centigrade, it is not always true that in 85 degree you will get the same result. You may get lot of microcrack because rate of water evaporation will be very, very high. So these are some of the tips which I learned. It may work, it may not work in all the cases, but this is what I know. Then you have made geopolymer, suppose in the laboratory. Then the question is whether your geopolymer is sustainable or not. That is very important question, because what happens, your geopolymer is sustainable only if you are addressing the environment, you are addressing the economy, and you are addressing the society, because this is the definition of sustainability. So when you are making geopolymer at laboratory, in most of the time you are not addressing, because you are making few kgs, so you are hardly reducing any carbon emission, you are hardly adding to any economy, and you are hardly helping the society. So that was a big question to us when we were working, and this question came after 8 years or 9 years of our research, that whether your geopolymer sustainable or not. So then we started discussing with people, and we thought that we need to upscale. What is the learning? We need to upscale, and we have to make product. So we are going towards the product side. So from research to application is like you are a small fish which is entering into the sea. Because a lot of question has been asked whether your process, product comply with any standard. There was no standard for geopolymer. Then what is the cost of production? If you are making geopolymer in laboratory, you cannot calculate the cost, because the techno-economics should be based on continuous production. What are the safety, and so on. Many questions has been asked. So to address this, all these questions, the only solution was that we have to pilot our process. We have to upscale our process to the pilot scale. So we started making effort from upscaling. So we decided on a pilot plant which should work on ambient temperature, should be capable of handling alkali, which are corrosive, because if you take a pilot plant from mild steel, alkali will eat everything. So after a few years, you don't have a pilot plant after all. So all those things, then in the pilot plant, all parameters should vary so that we can study the effect of parameters. It should be modular type, it should be continuous type, and have a short cycle time. When you make geopolymer in the laboratory, you take all the time, 5-minute mixing, then you are casting, keeping. But when you are continuously producing, you have 45-second cycle time. In your one cycle will complete either in 30 seconds or 45 seconds. So your geopolymer should come out as a product in that time. Then the geopolymerization takes place. So all those things we have decided. So this is the pilot plant we have put up with help from Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. It was the 5-ton capacity. I am not going into much technical detail. The only thing was it has both the system, vibration as well as hydraulic compaction. So first you vibrate the sample and then you compact the sample, and you will get a very good finish. So with this pilot plant, we started to work, and from coming from laboratory to pilot scale, it was the complete disaster. We initially, for the 6 months, we failed. We failed totally everywhere. If we are making sample above 35 degrees centigrade temperature, outside temperature, we were getting cracked, all the cracked sample. During rainy season, the shape was distorted. During the winter, lot of efflorescence. porosity was not uniform, strength was low, and we were not knowing what to do. We were struggling. We have lost around 20-25 tons of material, but we could not get the right type of geopolymer product from the fly ash. Then we started one by one eliminating the problem, and then gradually we learned that how to produce a good quality of geopolymer, and then our rejection started reducing. We changed the fluidity of geopolymer paste either by changing alkali composition or using superplasticizer, used admixture, controlled the porosity through vibrohydraulic compaction, changed the cycle time, curing schedule, and many other things. But we established the quality control procedure in the pilot plant. And that was our learning after all these struggle of almost 1 year and losing 25 tons of material and manpower. So then after learning, our rate of rejection become less than 5%. Sorry. And we have produced around 1500 tons of paving blocks, which were meeting IS specification of paving blocks. There is no specification for geopolymer. So we have used the Indian specification of paving blocks as a product quality. And we have tested it through a third party, and we have given to many party for field evaluation. It was put everywhere in our city, another city, and it was tested for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And when there was no deterioration in the product, we were confident. And with this, the success came, and we transferred our first technology where steel slag, fly ash, and granulated blast furnace slag has been used. One company called Jajil Enterprises, they have taken the technology and they are producing. So the product has property which is meeting IS specification. This is ours. It is free from any visual defects and meeting all the properties. So I am not explaining it, but this was the first success. After the first success, we were very confident and we started venturing into the different area. I will just briefly glance through some of the technology we transferred. This was the technology of prefabricated sandwich panel, where we have the layered geopolymer, where we have porous geopolymer in between and dense geopolymer outside, both sides. And this technology has been developed to make precasted walls, where you can make a wall of 2 meter into 1 meter. And yeah, Dr. Mustafa, am I exceeding my time?
No, it's fine. You can have time. Don't worry.
Okay, another 5 to 10 minutes I will complete.
Fine. Okay, proceed.
So then we have developed this for making precast wall. So one company, they started making precast wall, and this is very successful because it is lightweight, it is insulative, and it is geopolymer, so green product. The third technology, what we have done, it was for a company called Tata Power, who is producing fly ash. So we have developed the process and we have prepared a DPR for geopolymer cement, where the plant has two components. One is producing dry powder through a ball mill and another is producing alkali. And at site, you are carrying this and mixing together and you will have the geopolymer cement. It is something similar to ready-mix concrete concept. And recently, we have developed the technology for quick road repairing material because, you know, country like India and even Malaysia, the road is having very high traffic load and it gets sometime crack or potholes or other things which needs to be repaired very immediately. So we developed the process of making quick road repairing material, and it was given to a company called Venspra. So it has two type of product. One is quick set, one is ultra quick set. One sets in 40 minutes, another in 30 minutes. And in 4 hours, it is ready to take weight of light traffic because you have 20 MPa strength or 25 MPa strength. So this we have transferred only 1 year back, and which is being used by this company. So with these application, now we are looking for some more application. In fact, some of the very fancy area where we are working is geopolymer at moon, because you know the infrastructure development at moon is going to be a future research. So we are part of a consortium for all these things and many other things we are working. But I would like to highlight some of the work which is ongoing in my research group. Is three things I would like to mention. One is self-healing geopolymer, one is porous geopolymer for heat and sound insulation, and third is organic inorganic hybrid geopolymer composite. So the hybrid geopolymer is very interesting work one of my PhD students is carrying out, and where we are practicing hybridization at the molecular level, because there is two way out for making hybrid geopolymer. Either you physically mix organic and inorganic material, something like carbon fiber reinforced geopolymer, or other is you mix at molecular level. So we are doing at molecular level, where one is inorganic component and other is organic component, and during the reaction the building blocks are covalently connected. So organic and inorganic, they are cross-linked and connected, and it gives you very fancy property, like we could find compressive strength 2 times than the original, very good flexural strength and all other things. And you can see the carbon is uniformly dispersed throughout the matrix through the CPMA result, which is a very challenging thing. The second area which my colleagues are working is self-healing geopolymer. You know, self-healing is another very important area, because all type of concrete and cement, after some time, there is crack generation or hole generation. So we are trying to develop a geopolymer which can heal itself. And our concept is slightly a different concept, because normally what happens, people, they are impregnating capsule inside the concrete or cement, which is filled with some polymers, and with time this capsule they breaks down, and then it gives this self-healing effect. We are using graphene hydroxyapatite material. Hydroxyapatite is the material which is in our bone and which grows automatically. So the concept is, you have a geopolymer cement monolith, where already we have put the graphene hydroxyapatite material. So once the crack grows, then your graphene, it sends this signal. It sends this signal, and once the signal is there, this hydroxyapatite start growing. So, and the graphene is the nanoparticle, so these are part of hydroxyapatite as well. So it starts growing and heals the concrete, and gradually you will see there is no. So this is the concept on which we are working, and we are very hopeful that we will get some very exciting result in this area. The third thing is the porous geopolymer, where a lot of people are working, but we have the objective to develop the controlled porosity, where it can give you the good insulation property as well as good heat absorption capacity. So there are different type of pores in a geopolymer, like capillary pores, closed pores, gel pores, interlayer spaces, and others. So like capillary pores is very good for acoustic insulation, whereas closed pores as well as capillary pores too are good for heat insulation. Not much information is available for the gel pores or interlayer spaces. So for the sound insulation, once the sound enters into the interconnected pores, it gets diffused, or because of rubbing of air molecules, it converts into the heat energy and dissipates. So this is the concept, whereas heat insulation, the material has to play a part and the pore size distribution has to play a part. So already we have developed something in the laboratory scale with all these property, but we are optimizing so that it can be commercially produced for a specific application. So I think these are the three programs which are going on. With this, I would just like to mention that my other research interests are ceramic processing, characterization, and tailoring of properties. We work on solid waste utilization, especially mineral and metallurgical industry waste, including circular economy. We have a lot of activity on engineering the slag at hot stage, where we engineer the slag, take the metallic value out, and the slag composition we adjust in such a way that it is very suitable for geopolymer or for cement or for other application. Then mechanochemistry and mechanical activation of solids. We have a lot of activities, and also we are working on critical metals and rare earth extraction from secondary ore, something like red mud or fly ash and other things, because this is the very productive area where we are working. And finally, on the e-waste management, we have a lot of activities. With this, first I would like to acknowledge my mentors, my team members, my co-workers, students, collaborators, and sponsors who are part of this 20-year journey. And in this time, difficult time, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an interesting and inspiring lecture by Dr. Sanjay Kumar just now. And I believe a lot of new knowledge, information, as well as and ideas have been gained by all participants today. So now we opened for the session for Q&A. So any question can be asked in this session. Anybody wants to ask the question? Anybody can ask the question now. You can use either audio medium, or you can type in the chat session.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalam.
Good evening. I have a question for Dr. Sanjay.
Yeah, please.
First of all, thank you for your interesting sharing. So, as you told, to produce good geopolymer, we first should properly characterize our raw material.
Yeah.
So, we know that different batch of our materials coming with different properties or chemical composition.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, what do you think? Do we need, do we have any other methods or way to, you know, what if like every batch we have to characterize? So we have to work on finding the optimum ratios, such as solid, liquid, alkali activator, and all. So do we need any other way, like to make easy for finding the optimum ratio?
My very first question is, you are a researcher, or can you just please tell me?
I'm a researcher.
Yeah. So there is two way. One thing is making it easy, what you said. Another thing is making it good. So either it can be easy or it can be good. But if you want to make good geopolymer, you have to characterize properly. There is no easy way in the research.
Okay. So you mean that we have to, you know, characterize it for each batch of our raw materials, is it?
Yes, but
Okay,
normally
okay.
what happens, like if you are working with a raw material from one source, normally its chemistry is same, its mineralogy
Yeah.
is same. So yeah, but if you are changing your raw material or changing your source, then definitely you need to characterize.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other question?
Yeah, me, Subair from Indonesia.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, Dr. Sanjay, it's very interesting and informative presentation. One
you.
particular point that I'd like to know more is because this is quite new in terms of the use of graphene and hydroxide of geopolymer as a healing concrete, right?
Yeah.
You know that graphene is quite expensive actually, and a very long time require a long time to produce it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, in concentration, say for example, how much graphene and hydroxyapatite need to be put inside of the polymer so that graphene can send a signal that there is a crack inside of the materials.
Yes, very interesting question. The quantity of graphene is very, very low. It is not in percentage. It is the fraction of some percentage. Okay. As well as the hydroxyapatite. The hydroxyapatite should be around 0.5% maximum, not much, because we know cost is involved. So that is one thing. But what we are doing is actually we have the graphene technology where we are able to produce graphene at a lower cost. So that is why it is there. And but still it is at the research stage. We have not calculated the techno-economics at this moment, because first thing is the proof of concept. When it is established at the laboratory, then we will see how to reduce the price of the total geopolymer concrete, so we can use even lesser quantity of graphene. But interesting part is, graphene is the first work of graphene in the concrete is it arrests the crack growth. So so the first thing, the crack growth becomes very low and slow, and once it cannot be avoided, then it starts healing. So that is the advantage. But yes, cost part we will look after once we establish.
Very good. Thank you, doctor.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Subair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we have a few questions that have been dropped in the chatting. So I will read one of the questions from Muhammad Syahrul Hisham Muhammad Sani. What types of microbe that's suitable for geopolymer bioconcrete? Dr. Sanjay Kumar, can you please answer that question?
What type of microstructure?
Microbiology that's suitable for geopolymer bioconcretes.
What type of microbiology?
Yeah, microbe.
I could not understand your question because I talked about microstructure. Are you talking about what type of microstructure is good for geopolymer?
No, Muhammad Syahrul Hisham, can you please explain further?
Yeah.
About the microbe that you mean?
Maybe bacteria.
Oh, microbacteria.
Okay, bacteria you are talking. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, people are studying the self-healing bacteria, incorporation of self-healing bacteria in the geopolymer, because there are some bacteria which can survive the high alkalinity, and they also take the calcium content and produce the calcium carbonate. They take calcium oxide and they produce the calcium carbonate, which gives you the self-healing effect. This has been tested for the normal cement concrete at few of the places. but it is still at the research laboratory, because what happens, the growth of bacteria colony inside a concrete, sometimes it is more, sometimes it is less. So lot of parameters need to be established. But as I'm not from that background, from the bacterial side, so I am not much aware about the development, but I know some of the people have tried the use of growing bacteria in a geopolymer concrete. These bacteria are resistant to alkalinity, but result I don't know, because whether they could achieve good self-healing property or not, because typically a geopolymer cement is aluminosilicate. It do not have calcium in it. So if you have calcium, that bacteria works very well, because they take the calcium oxide and then they produce the calcium carbonate. So that is all at this moment I have to say.
All right, thank you. And then the next question is about the cost of cement after using geopolymer to improvement the cement properties. It will be expensive? For example, for 1 ton. So how about the cost for the cement overall, Dr. Sanjay Kumar?
I know for India, I know the cost of 1 ton of cement is around $100. Dollar is okay for you, because I will not be able to convert in MOL. So it is around $100. And the cost of 1 ton of geopolymer cement is also around $100. So for India, but see, you have to see the starting material. If you are using a waste material as a starting material, your cost is okay, because the main cost is coming from sodium hydroxide, sodium silicate, or potassium hydroxide. Okay, but remaining material should be very, very cheap. But if you are using metakaolin based geopolymer, the cost will be more than the cement cost. So the cost depends on the choice of your raw material.
All right. Okay, thank you, Dr. Sanjay. And then the next question is come from Nicola Zai, and she or he mentioned here that I saw Professor was working on the pore characteristic of geopolymer. So may I know how to control the pore size and pore distribution of the geopolymer into our desired ones?
Okay. There are few parameters which you have to control. Basically, what is the material you are using for the hydrogen generation to create the pores? Like we are using aluminum powder, we are using hydrogen peroxide, and few more things, right? So then the quantity of material you have to optimize. It should not be very high. The third thing is flowability of your geopolymer paste. If the flowability is good, the pore distribution will be uniform. If it is sticky, the pores will be trapped. Where the pores is generated, the size of pore will be more. On the top side, the size of pore will be less. So that is the third thing. The fourth thing is you have to control the setting time. The paste remain as paste for at least 40 minutes or 50 minutes, so that the pores should distribute. Pores should be distributed in whole matrix. So all these parameters you have to optimize, and then only you will be able to make a good porous geopolymer.
All right. Thank you for that. And then the next question, I continue for the next question. Can I? Or is there anybody who wants to ask question?
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Rafizal.
Okay.
I have one question. Okay, hi Dr. Sanjay.
Hi.
My name is Warid Wazin. So thank you for a very good and nice presentation. So actually, I just saw from the presentation, it's very interesting about the iron based geopolymer. So you mind to share with us about the preparation and mechanism of the geopolymer or any ceramic product that produced from the red mud or the same or similar with the red mud materials. I'm interested to explore this kind of material. If you don't mind, please share with us some of the in terms of the preparation or mechanism related to
Okay.
the red mud based geopolymer or ceramic product. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, yeah. See, red mud is a very difficult material because it is extremely fine size, a lot of iron oxide particles in it. But people are using red mud geopolymer. In fact, we have a publication on it. We have also used red mud in the geopolymer. The problem is you cannot use more red mud. You cannot make a geopolymer from 100% red mud because of the two reasons. First, the density of your geopolymer will be very high and the thermal conductivity of your product will be high. So you have to blend your red mud with something else, something like fly ash and red mud combination. And the advantage red mud gives is it contains some alkali in it. 2 to 4% alkali is there in the red mud. So that is already there and you have to add some more and you can make geopolymer. But the issues are, since as red mud is extremely fine in size, sometime you will see after 1 year or 1 and 2 year time, lot of fine cracks are generating on the surface because of the very fine particle. It forms a layer on the surface. So you need to optimize all these things if you want to make geopolymer from red mud. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there any possible application for this red mud based geopolymer, Doctor?
See, there is always application you have to find. I think one African country, they have used as some road making with red mud geopolymer. So the road was red in the color. The problem is acceptability. So if you make a red mud geopolymer, first, is there any standard? Because in India, red mud is a hazardous waste. So you cannot use in the building material unless until the hazardous waste category should be changed to industrial waste category. So all those things means, apart from science, there are many other issues. There are technical issues, there are administrative issues for the application. Science-wise, you can develop many things in the laboratory, but for application, those issues comes out. So all you have to see. Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Sanjay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other question that you are going to ask for our speakers today? Okay, there's one question from Rosnita Muhammad.
Yeah.
She says that you have mentioned on the microcracks on geopolymers.
Yeah.
Is there any possible way that we can control the microcracks through controlling the amount of heat of reactions? Or is there any specific amount of heat as a limit in order to avoid the microcracks? Dr. Sanjay Kumar.
Yeah. Very interesting question. See what happens. Any process optimization depends on the raw material you are using. If you are using metakaolin, the heat may be different. If you are using fly ash, it may be different. If you are using ready, so you have to optimize. You have to optimize but normally what happens if you have the controlled granulometry, means the distribution of coarse and fine particles are uniform in your geopolymer. You don't have excess of alkali solution, and if you are going for an ambient temperature processing, the possibility of microcracks generation is less. If you are using heating at any time, the possibility of microcrack generation is more. So that is all I can say. But you have to optimize.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sanjay Kumar. Okay,
Okay.
any other questions from participants? Is there any question? Before that, I would like to remind for all to fill the attendance form by the Google form, or you can use the QR code by scanning for the purpose of the e-certificate, and also at the end you will get the slide presentation. It can be emailed for everyone, so please fill the attendance. So is there any question more?
Prof. Sanjay, Mustafa.
Yeah.
I have question.
Okay.
Real application doesn't matter, very concrete and so on. We try to minimize the uses of materials, especially for chemical part or chemical part.
Yeah.
So any suggestion how we can reduce the chemical part, especially for the low molarity, especially for the
Okay.
resin part?
See, like, the main cost of a geopolymer comes from the chemical part. So we try to reduce the chemical part by adding some reactive material in the geopolymer composition, something like which is very amorphous in nature. Then the requirement of chemical becomes low. So that is one possibility. Another possibility is, when we use mechanical activation, reactivity improved. So the requirement of chemical, it has came down. So these two approaches we have used. But the another area where we were working is to use the in carbonate form. Because what happens, you are using sodium hydroxide, sodium silicate, potassium hydroxide. Originally, they are carbonate in nature. So then you are converting them to hydroxide or silicate by putting lot of energy in it. But if you are able to use carbonate directly, something like sodium carbonate or potassium carbonate, which are available in nature, the cost of chemical will come down, because carbonate is much cheaper than hydroxide or silicate. So that can be another approach. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other question? Maybe from Ibu Janwati. Do you have any question, Ibu Janwati?
Okay. Hello, Dr. Sanjay. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you. Okay, I have one important questions. In Indonesia, we have a lot of fly ash, but the quality, of course, is very different from the one power plant to another power plant, because the boiler is different. For example, if we take it from pulverized boiler, the reactivity is very high. But if we take it from the fluidized boiler, CFBC boiler, the reactivity is very low, even though the source of the coal may be the same. But if we just give up, like we don't want to use the fly ash from CFBC boiler, it will not solve the problem. We need to clean the fly ash from the power plant. So, of course, we can mix together. For example, we use like a 70% fly ash from CFBC and 20% fly ash from the pulverized from PCC. But the problem is the bigger problem is the particle of the fly ash from CFBC. Even though it is very small and relatively almost similar to the PCC, but its shape is not circular. So it is how to say, like it absorbs a lot of alkali. So if we change how to mix the geopolymer binder, of course we separate these two fly ash. So we put first the less reactive fly ash, but the problem is it will absorb all the liquid. So it means like we don't have any more space, any more liquid for the higher reactivity fly ash. And after that, we must put some super plasticizer to increase the workability. And another problem comes because of the cost of the product will increase. My question is, did you find any similar problem with me, and what should you do to increase the quality, but of course you have to maintain the cost? Thank you very much.
Okay. Indian fly ash, we don't have such problem because we have fluidized bed broilers mostly, and we generate every year around 200 million tons of fly ash, and out of which most of it is quality control. But we worked on some of the fly ash generated from Indonesian coals, that is brown in color with very high iron percentage, and all those things we have worked. But you know, what you said is a very specific problem, and I will need some more data to comment on it, because I don't have a ready-made answer. It is a complex thing. So unless until I know details of both the fly ash and other things, very difficult to tell you a solution.
Yes.
In India, we don't have such problem. We have plenty of fly ashes, which are class F fly ashes, good quality, so no issue. Okay.
Lucky you, Dr. Sanjay. But of course, another questions I want to ask you, because in Indonesia, all coal ash, including batumas, are considered as hazardous materials. So yeah, it is very difficult to apply this kind of material in the field, because we need to ask license or special permissions from the ministry, from the government, and it becomes very difficult. Yes. And how about, maybe I want to ask some friends here. In Indonesia, of course, we need to use a lot of fly ash, but we have some restrictions. How about in India, and also about in Malaysia, Pak Mus? Maybe you can share your experience.
Okay. In India, the fly ash was also falling in the hazardous waste category before the year 1994. Then Government of India has formed a fly ash mission to look into its application and other things, and based on the recommendation and lot of study result, they have suggested that the fly ash should be taken out from hazardous waste and put into the industrial waste. So the category of fly ash is changed from hazardous waste to industrial waste. Now fly ash is an industrial waste, but as it has lot of application these days, then after some time its category will also change to resource material. So you have to buy fly ash in future in India. So if your fly ash is quality controlled, you have to pay money for it. Currently, it is free of cost, but in future it will be there. So similar approach your country can adopt. First, you have to form some government body who can look into its application part, especially for infrastructure development, and then they can declassify from hazardous and put it into industrial waste.
Okay, thank you very much. And how about Batamash?
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Jonati, Dr. Sanjay Kumar.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions from participants?
Yeah, one more questions.
One more
Yeah.
question, okay.
Okay. So far we talk about fly ash. And how about Batamash?
Okay. Bottom ash is a difficult material because it has lower reactivity than fly ash. What happens in fly ash, you have a crystalline phase, you have the glassy phase. In bottom ash, you have mostly crystalline phase, low reactivity. Another thing is in the bottom ash, you have a lot of porosity. So if you make some product from bottom ash, the product absorbs more moisture, more water. So those are the difficulty. In India, people are using bottom ash for making bricks, but they are mixing it with fly ash, like say 50% fly ash, 50% bottom ash, and they are replacing sand with bottom ash, and they are making building bricks. But I don't know much application as of now. But what I was thinking here, if we can mechanically activate the bottom ash and can improve its reactivity, then it can also be used for other products like cement or geopolymer.
Yes. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
sharing.
All right. Is there any questions? Is there any more questions from participants?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, ja, cukup kok.
All right.
Nah.
So now we already coming to the end of our lecture session today. So on behalf of Center of Excellence, Geopolymer and Green Technology UNIMAPS, and also from the RMC Research Management Center UNIMAPS. So I would like to thank you very, very much to our speakers today, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, who have already spent your times in this session and share a very valuable experience in geopolymer technology. And last but not least, I also want to thank you for all of the participants who are attending in the international lecture today. And I hope you had a very great sharing experience, and we are looking forward to see you at the next event, inshallah. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.